Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from all over the United States and other countries as well. Thank you for joining the La Bolona Valley Bromeliad Society Zoom presentation featuring Guillermo Rivera. I'm Ken Simpson, the Vice President, and we welcome all of our members and guests. Thank you for joining us. Paul has muted all participants for this presentation. Please stay muted during the presentation. Adjust the view on your screen in your Zoom window for either speaker or gallery. Guillermo will take questions after his presentation. You may unmute yourself during your question only. When finished, please mute yourself again. If you'd like to receive announcements of our future meetings, please email your name to lvbvs@dslextreme.com regarding Zoom. We thank you, Guillermo, for the time and effort you spent on making this presentation for us. Guillermo was born in Argentina, earned a BS degree in biology at the University of Cordoba in Argentina, an MS in marine biology at Northeastern University, and a PhD in botany at the University of Cordoba. He was formerly a researcher at the University of Cordoba and currently owns Plant Expeditions, formerly South America Nature Tours. Guillermo describes his presentation, Ecuador, Bromeliad Paradise. If there is one country on earth that offers such a variety of habitats, it is Ecuador. Desert, coast, Andes, Amazon forest, Pacific forest. It is not surprising that such a small country boasts the second largest number of bird species in the world after Colombia. Well, it is not surprising either that Ecuador also offers a cornucopia of bromeliads from all different habitats. Tillandsia, Regia, Regia, Picarnia, Puyo, Guzmania are among them, with many species to see and discover. This presentation will cover the whole country with its incredible habitats and many plants visited during his 7 trips. The LVBVS is a nonprofit organization. Attendance at our Zoom presentations is free to all Bromeliad enthusiasts. If you'd like to support our efforts, donation can be made. If you have a camera and you want to take a picture of this, or I'll put on the chat the information on this. Okay, Guillermo, I'm going to relinquish my screen share, and you can let's see where that goes. And you can start sharing yours in a minute. This will be edited out. So let's see. I must change something. Because, oh, there it is. Okay. All right, there we go. And you can share your screen, Guillermo.
I thank everybody for joining this presentation. Ecuador is probably one of the countries that I visit the most in the last 10 years. I think I've done 7 different trips, most of them in the month of June, July, August, just one of them in the month of January. And I explain why later why that's important in Ecuador particularly. So like I said in the description, Ecuador it's Bromeliad's paradise. There's no other country that has, in such a small area, such a diversity on not just bromeliads and generally of plants, on birds, on different animals. And the great thing is it's a small place. The roads are great, so it's very easy to travel and to get around the whole country. So without further ado, I usually do a little introduction on the country. Of course, Ecuador is located at the equator. It's a small country in South America. It borders Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. And then on the west, it will have the Pacific. It has an area that is quite small. It's about the size of Colorado. And the capital is Quito, of about 2 million people. However, Guayaquil, because it's basically a port, and I'd like to know, can you see my pointing screen? If somebody can give me feedback.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure. Sometimes I have to point in one screen and so I have to point in another one. Guayaquil is right here. It's located in this area, which is the main port of Ecuador. And because of that, the population has grown much faster than the capital, Quito, and it has become like the largest city in the country. For geographical features, mainly let's just do three terrains. You have basically the jungle or the Amazon forest on the east, and you can see that's half of the country. The good thing about it is fairly inaccessible, and because of that, let's say that most of the Amazon forest is fairly well preserved, with some exceptions, as you might know. Then you have the central area, which is basically it's where the Andes range go over here. They call the area from north to south, and they have different valleys. So they have like the Andes are very wide here, as opposed to in between Argentina and Chile, which is basically one chain. And then on the west side, that will be a coastal plain that has different climates, as you will see a little bit on the next slide. You don't have to read all this. This is mainly to explain, because sometimes people think, people talk about El Niño, where does the name come from? And basically comes from these currents over here. You have the Panama current in the north, which is sometimes defined also as the Niño current, which is a tropical hot water flowing from north to south. And then you have the Humboldt current coming from the south, coming from Peru, actually comes from Antarctica, and it makes it all the way up here. So depending on how strong these currents are in different years, sometimes the Humboldt current will go a little bit farther north, which makes, because it's cold, it makes this area very, very dry. But sometimes because the warmer current that comes from the north, or Niño current, comes from the north, it's Panama thing, pushes a little bit farther south, you get a lot of rain in this area, which is usually dry. And this doesn't occur every year. It occurs every 4, 5, or 6 years, depending on different conditions. But it's basically what the name El Niño comes from, is from this Panama current. Is also called current El Niño. And so when it's stronger, you get a lot more, and it's a tropical hot water. Therefore, you're going to have a lot of rain on the coastal areas of Ecuador. And this is the main reason why the weather can be very, very changing, especially in the coastal areas. Again, you don't need to read the whole thing. I just want to point out how many different climates can we have in such a small area. And the reason being, first of all, you have this cold current from the south, which is making this place very arid because there's not rain. Cold water doesn't evaporate. Therefore, there's not rain created in this area. And you will have arid weather in this area. Then you have, of course, on the east side, you have something touching the Amazon, and that will be tropical rainforest, which is right here on the right. You have a tropical monsoon area right here in red, and this is because the Panama current brings a lot of humidity, a lot of moist, and it makes this a very rainy area. It doesn't go over because you have the Andes over here. So this creates a barrier, and that's why they have a very, very humid area, which is a tropical monsoon area. In between this tropical monsoon and the arid, you will have something intermediate, will be a tropical grasslands in this area. Then you have a temperate, humid area in the farther south, in the Andes. This is in higher elevation. Then you have a temperate dry zone right here, which is basically a little bit lower elevation, but because you are on the shadow of the rains, this will be fairly dry. And then you have the paramo, which is basically anything about 2,000 to 3,000 meters in elevation with a different climate. So you can see why the Andes will make these small countries so many different habitats. And that's the main reason why this country is so diverse, because of all these different niche, let's say. So I'll try to give a little bit on each place. I'll try to give just a little idea of what the type of weather or the type of climate that we have. This is in the southern part. You can see it's got big cactus. Most of these are deciduous trees. And this is basically a dry climate area that we saw in the south of Ecuador. The annual rainfall is very low, around 6 inches, and it has a very marked defined dry season and low elevation. There's a few tillandsias that grow in this area, Tillandsia Disticca. You can see one of these gray epiphytic tillandsias. They usually adapt very well in dry weather. Regia Espinosa, also another one of these gray looking tillandsias or brisias. And Brisia barclayana, just a detail of the inflorescence. Because of this dry weather, it's common to find this type of tree, Ceiba trichis tundra. You can see a person right here. This is from the same family as the baobab, so it's a Bombaceae. And Ceiba is a genus that grows from Mexico all the way down to Argentina. The flowers are pollinated by bats. And you can see Tillandsia usnioides, which is very widely distributed throughout the South America and Central America. In the southern part, when you go up in the Andes, you start getting a little bit of this temperate humid that I talk on the presentation. So it's basically mountain or cloud forest. You can see the fog, and the elevation is a little higher over here, 15 to 4,000 feet. And the annual rainfall is about 60 to 100 inch of rain every year, and it's constant throughout the year. There's not a dry season. And that gives rise to like something like this, like tree ferns. A lot of pitcarnias grow in this area, Pitcarnia septrihera. This is one of the plants that you can see if we go in January. You have to think of Ecuador as being at the equator. There's not really, let's say, winter and summer. And so basically the seasons are defined by rainfall, and there's nothing that triggers, there's no shorter days or longer days. So there's nothing really that triggers the flowering season on some of the plants, except for the rainy season of the patterns of rains. And that's why you can go to Ecuador in July and you can go in January and find a completely different set of plants in bloom. And most of these plants, if they're not in bloom, they're really difficult to identify, especially on the tillandsias. A lot of tropical plants, as you can see over here, a lot of Gesneriaceae, a lot of Ericaceae grow here. And of course, a lot of orchids. Orchids is, Ecuador is the country with the most species of orchids. There's about 4,000 species just in Ecuador. So out of the 20 to 30,000 species in the whole world, you can find 4,000 species just in Ecuador. And there's like new species being described pretty much every day in Ecuador. Maxillaria marmoliana. A lot of these terrestrial orchids, Sobralia rosea, with quite a few species. Little grasshopper in the back over here. And this is very typical for the trees over there. A lot of epiphytic flora, mainly bromeliads and quite a few orchids, a few aroids also growing on the trees. Just a few examples of aroids, anthuriums, philodendrons are very, very common, especially in this reserve. The good thing about this reserve, they have like, nice roads that you can walk, you can hike. Otherwise, it will be just so close that you couldn't really explore. So this is a nice little hike to see what's around. I have become a little bit more enthusiastic about heliconias, especially if you travel to Ecuador. You run to 20, 30 species of heliconias. One that is widely distributed, especially in the southern part of the country, is Guzmania lingulata. Guzmania gloriosa is also widely distributed. You can find it in the northern part of Ecuador, as well as in the south. It also grows in Colombia and it grows in Peru. Guzmania whitmacki. I have to say that Guzmanias are usually from lower and very humid areas. So if you're trying to grow Guzmanias, please give it plenty of water. In kind of shady areas, they do a lot better. Guzmania angustifolia, it makes huge clumps covering the trees, but it can also grow in the ground like this one. Guzmania remi. And all these pictures that you're seeing right now, it's just from this little walk that you can take on this reserve. So literally in just an hour, you can see probably about 20 different species, mainly Guzmanias. Guzmania alborosea and Guzmania tertiary. You can see the diversity just on this genus in this particular reserve. Guzmania schezeriana. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Ecuador is one of the most diverse countries in the world for birds. And it has about 132 species of hummingbirds. Out of the 300, almost half of them you can see just in Ecuador. We go to a great place. There's a lot of lodges, mainly for bird watchers, but we take advantage of those to look at plants as well. But sometimes we get a little distracted with these nice little creatures. Silencia Complanata is also a very widely distributed Tillandsia from Colombia all the way down to Peru. It's quite variable, but what makes it very distinctive is this particular inflorescence, how it is hanging away from the plant. But like I said, it can be very variable depending on where they grow. Tillandsia convertiflora, also growing at this reserve. And I just put in two, but you can in this particular place, you can take maybe 100 pictures of butterflies with stunning colors and shapes. Acmea angustifolia, quite common. And a few other heliconias that are found in this place. So all those plants that I just showed, you can see literally a couple hours if you walk around a little bit in the Reserva Buenaventura. If we travel a little bit farther towards the east and we go a little bit higher up to 2,500 feet, we go to a place that is it's a little bit drier. It's a temperate dry climate, and it has a dry season. So of course, the plants that you're going to find in this place, you're going to find a lot of deciduous plants. And the flora varies a little bit from what we just saw. You still find a few Guzmanias that are able to adapt to that dry season, Guzmania monostachya. But we start seeing some more of these gray-looking Vrisias or Tillandsias, like Vrisia apeni, one of my favorite plants. Tillandsia monadelpha, just the inflorescence. And Tillandsia porphyrocraspida, it used to be called Tillandsia Vrisia cylindrica. The real name is Tillandsia porphyrocraspida. I wish they just left the name Vrisia cylindrica just so it's easier to pronounce. Hilancia Pruinosa, this is quite a difficult plant to spot. Unfortunately, on one of the trips, this plant was taken by one of the participants, I found out. Later on the trip, somebody spotted him taking this plant. So now it's hard to find them. This is one plant that I saw pretty much you see it on every trip because it's quite large, quite conspicuous. But again, if you don't see them with flowers, it's hard to identify. But then on one of the trips that we did in January, we saw the inflorescence, Tillandsia glauca. Grassinia is a genus with a few species, mainly from northern Peru and Ecuador. It sort of looks like a Tillandsia, just the inflorescence are quite different. Tillandsia fraseri. Another very large terrestrial Tillandsia, Tillandsia secunda, near the town of Catamayo. And as you can see, the vegetation, it is much, much drier than Buenaventura Reserve. There is a dry season over here. And that allows for some succulent plants to grow, like this nice echeveria. Even in these drier places, you still find a few orchid, in this case, Epidendron sapronites. And you can see the flowers being born from the leaves. This is a plant that I did not see probably in the first 3 or 4 trips, even though it's quite conspicuous. So most likely it has to do with the rain. This is sort of like a small grassy Pitcairnia. And of course, with the flowers, it's quite easy to spot, Pitcairnia heterophylla. Sometimes it will have more reddish flowers, sometimes more orange, and sometimes even yellow. Again, in these dry areas, you'll find this gray, the leaves are gray on this Tillandsia hitchcockiana. And there's a few other, Tillandsia floribunda. A detail of the flower, of the inflorescence. And Tillandsia straminea. So around the town of Catamayo, we are still pretty much with the same temperate, dry climate. Pretty much the same elevation, but there's quite a few nice plants. This is Tillandsia loxensis. I found this on the first trip, and it was one of those things that you find. And like I said, I did not have much experience 10 years ago on Ecuador, and so I have to rely a lot of the identifications by posting some of my pictures on forums and different. Facebook wasn't even big at that time, so. And I posted this and nobody was able to identify. Everybody went crazy when I showed this plant. This plant is probably with inflorescence is, I will say, about 10 feet tall, 9 feet tall. So it's a very, very large terrestrial Tillandsia. And it was finally, I correspond a lot with Jose Manzanares, and a lot of the ideas now that I have are after his knowledge. He's a person from Spain that lives in Quito, and he has written a couple of books on Bromeliad from Ecuador. Anyway, he just described this with a botanist from Loja, and they call this Tillandsia loxensis. If you subscribe to the journal, it was probably, I think, the publication came about a year ago. I did prepare the herbarium sheets for him. This is another very nice Rainforest euryletria. Another nice Tillandsia, terrestrial Tillandsia, Tillandsia pyramidata, variety vivipara. You can see why it's called vivipara, because it's got these nice pops over here. They will fit in your pocket if you're trying to grow this, but it's illegal to take any plants out of Ecuador. This is a nice Tillandsia that, again, I saw it on one of my first trips, and I never saw really a good plant until I think it was on the last trip or in 2018. And you can see what the inflorescence looks like. And we just saw a very, very nice population of this plant, Tillandsia engleriana. Another nice Rainforest, Rainforest tondusiana. I think it was also described just a few years ago. Bromeliad bicolor. This is one hill that honestly, I haven't been able to get back to. Back in the day, there was, they only rely on those Garmin GPS, and sometimes you forget to set it up. And now with the phones, it's much easier to record locations. Anyway, I haven't been able to find this hill back. I think I have an idea where it is. Bromeliad bicolor, a beautiful Bromeliad with a very nice inflorescence. This is overlooking the town of Loja. This was, again, one of the locations that I found in my second or third trip, and then I wasn't able to get back until my last trip that I was, there are so many roads and little roads that you can take. But anyway, I start exploring. Every time I explore a different road until on my last trip, we found this. And you can see it's a beautiful Puya parviflora with the background of Loja. This is probably a hybrid of parviflora with loxensis. Again, this is a Puya, and it gets burned. You can see at the base of the plant, this hill usually gets burned, but these plants seem to survive quite well. And the flowers, they range from like this emerald green to very dark, sort of bluish green color. on a rock very close by. And this was the main reason why I wanted to go back. This is probably the best place to find or to photograph Tillandsia petrea. It usually grows on very rocky areas, but it's usually not very accessible. But I remember that this area, you can actually walk up to the plants. Tillandsia petrea, very nice pink bracts and yellow flowers, as you can see here. And the plant is about 20 inches tall. So it's very, very attractive terrestrial Tillandsia. Close by, Loja, we find Podocarpus National Park. You will expect to see many Podocarpus, but that's not the case. It is montane forest, but also a very high elevation. It's actually a paramo because it reaches up to 10,000 feet. So you have a very large, a very high, let's say, eastern or western side of the park on the Andes. But then because it's so large, it drops down all the way to the Amazon hills or foothills. So you go from paramo to sort of like an Amazon forest at the bottom or at the base of it. And of course, it's got two different entrances. So this very, very different, even though it has the same name, it has a very different flora. Like I said, the high part is around 10,000 feet. And what's very common at these elevations are puyas, in this case, Puya eryngioides. This plant is just a cutie. It's about, I'll say maybe 20 inches tall, 25 inches tall. And it just, it will be a nice plant to grow, except that from that elevation, it will be very difficult to grow whatever in Florida or even in, some people have tried it in San Francisco and they don't do very well. Very attractive. You can see the bluish flowers branching out of the middle of the inflorescence. This is, again, the Puya hybrid that grows in this area, most likely Loxensis and eryngioides. Just a detail of the plant and a detail of the flower of this Puya hybrid. And we were lucky in one of the trips to see this. We don't have many mammals in South America. However, we do have one bear. This is a spectacle bear. And the spectacle bear, the main a source of food is actually bromeliads, and it's actually puyas. I guess the spines don't seem to bother him. So we got a really nice view. This was taken with a big zoom, but we got a really nice view and just very, very lucky. I think only on 2 of my trips, I have seen spectacle bears in the wild like this. On one of the trips, we went with Pancoide, and we were just exploring this park, and you can see in the back over here, there's actually a hybrid of Tillandsia and Tillandsia Complanata times probably Tovarensis. And natural hybrids are not very, very common, but this was obviously a nice hybrid. And when we mentioned it to Jose Manzanares, he said, don't even think about describing it because we're working on it. So I guess it will, eventually it will come out. So it's Complanata times Stenura. I say Tovarensis. The location wasn't very nice to photograph. Regia Tekendame, also high elevation in Podocarpus National Park. Just a detail. It's widespread. You can find Tekendame also in Colombia and in Peru. Tillandsia rubella, which has sort of like creamy flowers. You can see over here. Differing from Tillandsia tovarensis, which has purple flowers. Just beautiful bromeliads with lichens growing on the branches. Guzmania gloriosa, sorry I didn't have the name on it. Also quite variable, sometimes with a red color, sometimes with more orange color. Guzmania gloriosa. And at this elevation, we are over 10,000 feet in elevation. We still find plenty of orchids. I'm sorry. Some Masdevallia, some Epidendrum. I don't know what that is as an orchid. Tillandsia boegi. Beautiful, beautiful Tillandsia with a pendant orange inflorescence. Tillandsia incurva. Again, all these plants growing basically out of lunch stop. You got about 20 different bromeliads growing around you while you're having your sandwich. And like I said, Podocarpus National Park has a lower entrance from the Amazon. And of course, the weather here is very, very tropical, over 70 inches of rain throughout the year, and very low elevation. So this is on the way to that lower entrance. And the good thing about Ecuador that it is a small country, but it's got plenty of roads, but some of the roads get, let's say for transportation, they build new roads, which are more accessible for big trucks. And then you have these roads that are not used anymore, those dirt roads, and they're great to explore because there's no traffic, we're able to hike. And of course, the plants are very, very accessible. Tillandsia barbeyana, Tillandsia barlotti, one of my favorite Tillandsias too. You can see the orange bracts and it's got tiny yellow flowers that you can barely see right there. Tillandsia nonodorfia, also described recently. Tillandsia nervisepala, a very, very difficult Tillandsia to spot. I've only seen it once. It's characteristic, these sort of grayish leaves and sort of sticking upright. Tillandsia eterandra with the tiny white flowers, sometimes making big clumps on the trunks. And a nice different Guzmania retusa, with the flower buds and already in flower. And the habitat, as you can see, it's very tropical. And again, we are in the mountains, but coming down towards the Amazon basin. Near the river, it's very common to find pitcarnias, in this case, Pitcarnia triane. So again, if you're trying to grow pitcarnia, plenty of water, and throughout the year, a lot of humidity. Pitcarnia maidifolia, with the detail of the flower, and another habitat shot. As you can see, some of the land has been cleared. There's a few houses over here for ranching, but most of them, it's a very, very nice habitat and beautiful habitat for bromeliads. This is probably the most widespread showy Tillandsia fendleri or fendleri, growing from Colombia all the way down to Machu Picchu. If you have been to Machu Picchu, you take the train, you will see out of the window plenty of these Tillandsia fendleri or fendleri. Tillandsia truncata. And we get to this town that I forgot, Zamora. Zamora is one of these towns. There's quite a few towns in Ecuador where they say that has like a special properties like the water or something, where many, many people that live here, they go over 100 years old. And this is one of them where a lot of it is inhabitants, they are over 100 years old. You can see it's in the middle of the Amazon, but still a nice church, a nice architecture, very old. And Brisia samorensis grows here. Very, very localized. And this picture was taken with a flash on one of the trips I was birding. And we went out early in the morning, and I have to resource to a flash to take a good picture of it. So again, this is the lower part of Podocarpus National Park with some nice trails, tropical plants like this Psychotria pulpigiana. I think it's called hot lips, the common name, and quite a few Pitcarnias, Pitcarnia pavoni and Pitcarnia lemani. And if you're bored, I just usually put this picture just to wake you up a little bit when I have the audience falling asleep. So just maybe everybody doesn't want to see your plant photos, and I go, yes, they do. So we just keep going. So we start a little bit going towards sort of like a temperate wet montane forest, a little bit higher in elevation, and it's a little drier. So sometimes in some places you will find, in this case, mesobromeliads that doesn't require so much water. But you also find this, again, these sort of gray tillandsias that adapt better to drier conditions or places with a dry season, Tillandsia straminea. And on my last trip, just going by the bus, and I was all the trees will have this Tillandsia straminea, and I spotted something a little different. And this is Tillandsia kikae that was also recently described. I think it is on the last journal or the previous one, Tillandsia kikae, named after the wife of somebody who lives in, Ohio, I think, or Idaho, that travels to Ecuador a lot. I think Pam Cody has some plants of those. Tillandsia engleriana that I showed earlier, and basically in this place, all the Tillandsia were growing on the trees were Tillandsia engleriana. So beautiful habitat to see this plant. And from my first trip to Ecuador, I always have to make a stop, and this is sort of like a pasture where they left this huge tree. This is probably about, I'll say probably 50 feet tall, just covered with different bromeliads. Probably about 4 or 5 species of bromeliad, Tillandsia tovarensis. There's a Grassinia tetracantha. I forgot what else. We'll see over there. Plenty of orchids also growing on this tree, but it's just a beautiful place to have lunch and have the people look around this nice habitat, let's say. Tillandsia ionochroma is the proper one. I think on my last trip, I actually flew the drone around this tree. I haven't put any footage. Tillandsia ionochroma. And Grassinia tetranta variety scarlatina growing in the tree as well, with the detail of the flowers. Again, sometimes you stop in these dry areas that have water nearby, you'll find some nice echeveria. But the main thing besides this echeveria was this beautiful moth or butterfly, that we spotted on the echeveria, sort of like a deltoid thing that I actually didn't see until I think I looked at the pictures. Tillandsia humboldti, fairly uncommon. In fact, it was Jose Manzanares who helped me ID in Grassinia eulilitria that we saw before. Going to some of these places in the mountains, you find some interesting locations of different towns. And there's a town of Saraguro where they say that some of the Incas, when they were spreading out because of the Spaniards got to Peru and they were invading and stuff like that, like a big, let's say, immigration from Incas from the south came over here. And they actually, they form a very tight and close community, and they dressed in a very distinctive way. Mainly just black, everything is black. Those things that you see around the neck, it's all gold. And this is a typical dress from a lady, but you can see even a young guy will have this sort of like long shorts or short long pants, everything dressed in black. And sometimes the ladies will have like a blouse with different colors. A very typical hats, as you can see here in the mountains. This is the Saraguro people. One of the trips we actually stay in the town, which was quite interesting. This is just the habitat around the town of Saraguro. And we find Tillandsia demisa with a very large pendant inflorescence, immature and mature inflorescence. Again, some of these unused roads are great to explore. Different plants over here. You may recognize Greg DiCirico. This is Andy Sekinen, Roger Lane. Some of the people have joined in the past. Tillandsia andretai was going on this wall, which is a very, very nice Tillandsia. This is Tillandsia tectorum, one of my favorite plants from Ecuador. It has very, very different forms with longer leaves, longer spikes, more tight, depending on where they grow. There's actually a book that describes all the Tillandsia tectorum with given different names. A little difficult to grow because it doesn't take water. It does take humidity, but it doesn't take water very well. And just the details of the flowers. And Greg the Chirico is not happy, but when I said, can't you point your head down so I get a little bit more light reflecting from his bald head into the flowers over here, he wasn't happy about it, but I still took the picture of it. I thought he made a very good picture. Puya nutans, growing about 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet. Again, this is one of the plants that you will see like this if you go in January. Most of the times we go in July, so we don't see in full bloom like that one. Growing together with Puya pygmea, which looks very similar to that Puya eryngioides that we saw in Podocarpus National Park. And they grow side by side with Puya nutans. Around Cuenca, Cuenca is probably the third largest city after Guayaquil and Quito. It's a very nice town. A lot of expats choose to live over here. It has an international airport, so you can fly Miami to Cuenca directly. And it has an elevation around 3,000 feet. Very nice weather year round. Very close to the town, you have Tillandsia incarnata. It is a very, very nice population, but it's right next to a very heavy traffic road. So usually I have to tell people to be very, very careful to, and literally we stay for less than 10 minutes. Tillandsia limani, growing also on the side of the road, which we will see in other places. Just a detail of Tillandsia limani flower. And this next plant was something that I spotted on, I think in my first trip or second trip. And again, like I said, I used to use those forums where you put some photos and you try to get some IDs. And I was very surprised that nobody was able to come to a name to this plant. And so every time I go and I go, well, I don't know what it is, Tillandsia sp. And finally, Jose Manzanares, and I've been asking him mainly what is this plant. He actually named the plant after me. So I'm honored to have a beautiful Tillandsia name after myself. So this is a population that is near Cuenca. The plants are probably about, I'll say 2 feet tall. And again, it is on this very heavy traffic road, so people don't usually get to stay there that long. But on my last trip, and about, I'll say 50, 80 miles south of it, from the bus on a very far hill, I spotted something that looked different. And you can see this, and this was maybe like 100 feet or more than 200 feet from the road. And I go, okay, stop. And so we actually made the hike over there. You can see it's very, very damaged hill. It has been burned, so very, very, no very pristine habitat. And that was basically, I was surprised to mainly see the same plant as the one growing near Cuenca. Although these plants are about, I say 5 feet tall. So if it was me, I would call this variety major. And this picture, Carl Carter took this picture of me. I was happy to find this without, maybe I thought maybe this had a name, but it was basically when I consulted, it was, well, it's just a variety, a much larger variety than the one growing near Cuenca. Tillandsia incarnata, just a detail of the flower. And one of the main things, or the nicest thing about staying in Cuenca is that it has a hotel that has spring water, like sort of it has a pool with a very nice, pleasant hot water to relax after a long day of hiking. And usually the next day we make a side trip to Santa Isabel or Azuay Valley, which is a very dry area, temperate dry. However, it's sort of like in a canyon that eventually, if you keep on traveling west, you actually start getting some moist from the Pacific, as you will see in some of the pictures. Anyway, the elevation is 1,000 to 4,000. It's got a very marked dry season. And again, in El Nino, years, this place will get a lot more rain, and some of these, like I said, Tillandsia tectorum, which is the white plants that you see over here, they don't take the water very well, and so a lot of them get damaged during El Nino year. This is like a famous rock that is on the Tillandsia book, if you're familiar with it, with a Japanese, I forgot his name. Anyway, Pam was happy to get her picture on the same rock. And it's just a beautiful little garden over here with Euphorbia, Espostoa, Tillandsia limani, Tillandsia tectorum, all growing in the same rock over here. And as I told you before, some of the Tillandsia tectorum can have very compact forms like this one. It looks almost eaten by a rodent, but no, those are the leaves. They're very, very short. And you can see just on the rock, you see a beautiful garden with a Tillandsia, Deuteroconia, there is Euphorbia and Tillandsia tectorum. This is a Tillandsia that grows on the side of the hill. Again, it's not limani, but they are trying to figure out what it is. So I've just leave it as Tillandsia sp. Most likely they will come up with a name. They were trying to figure out if it was a hybrid with limani and something else. But it just it has a very distinctive bright yellow color. And as you can see, growing together with the Espostoa, so it is a quite dry area. Another Tillandsia that grows here that is not very common is Tillandsia Mima. You can see again, growing next to the cactus. And that is the famous rock. And this is the Azuay Valley. And some more pictures of this Tillandsia tectorum that most people seem to like when we go over there. And as we go a little bit farther west, we go into a canyon, and the canyon is above this nice river. And of course, there's a lot of humidity from the river, so there's more of this Tillandsia limani. You can see in the top, you'll find tectorum and Espostoa. As you go down the canyon, you will have Tillandsia limani growing. Nice cactus, Espostoa frutescens. And again, a picture from the canyon with Tillandsia limani. You can see it has a lot more humidity. But like I said, in some of the years, and as you approach or you go towards the coast, there's sort of like a funnel effect from this valley that is very dry that sucks humidity from the Pacific. And you're able to see, for example, this, which is a little bit more tropical and more humid areas, Tillandsia cyanea. This plant is no more than 10 miles from the previous pictures that I was just showing Tillandsia tectorum. So you can see in such a short distance, humidity can change the flora quite dramatically. Even Pitcairnias grow over here, Pitcairnia equatorialis. When we travel north, we usually stay around the town of Baños, and Baños is at the base of the Tungurahua volcano. So sometimes if you sleep over there, you can actually be woken up at night with a little bit of explosion and activity from the volcano. Most of the time it is in yellow. Some of the years that I travel over there, it has an orange, which is the way that the locals describe how active it is, the volcano. This is in the town of Baños. Also has hot springs, so it's sort of like a touristy place for local people. And in one of the years, this was probably a year that it was in orange, we actually saw this at night with the lava coming out of the volcano. This is again, Tungurahua volcano. Ecuador has plenty of volcanoes, and on most of the trips, you're actually able to see some of them with a little bit of activities, and you hear some explosions. This is on the side of the volcano. Unfortunately, this was in only one trip that it was this clear that we can actually explore. Every time I go, I sort of plan to go to this road. And if it is raining or if it is too foggy, I have to choose a plan B, because literally you don't see anything when you go over there. But one of the plants that we like to see is Regia. There's 4 species of Regia. I think all of them grow in Ecuador. Regia Volcanica, which is this very large plant over here. And this is the base. The flowers are actually born at the base of the leaves. It has very nice spination, as you can see here. Tillandsia biflora, very common around the volcano. And it's common in cultivation as well. And again, another place where you'll find some of the echeverias. A high elevation, another Puya glomerifera, with a nice inflorescence. And this nice Tillandsia in bloom, Tillandsia arpocalix. Again, this is one plant that I've seen for many, many years, and I didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden you got not only a flower, but that particular trip we have Jose with us. And so he was able to describe it and tell us what it was, Tillandsia arpocalix. And again, plenty of orchids, Rostechia crassilabia, Plerotalis, now it has a different name, and a very particular epidendrum growing at the base of the volcano. On the last trip, we did this, there's plenty of waterfalls coming out of this river that flows into Baños, and I call it the waterfall road. And it's hard to have a perspective, but if you look here on the left, you can see a passerelle with people right here. So that gives you an idea of where we are, how big this canyon is, and I'm actually on another passerelle over here. Beautiful, beautiful habitat to spend the day and to get under the waterfalls. And one of them, so you can actually get under. Tillandsia platyrachis grows in this place. And again, some more orchids, Maxillaria sanderiana. Tillandsia incurva that we also saw near Podocarpus National Park. And this is most likely a new species. Again, it was with Jose, and somebody had this in sort of like a little garden next to a cafe, but it was taken from habitat. And so probably on the next trip, I actually like to explore what this one grows, most likely related to platyrachis, a little different. This is beautiful Rainforest, Rainforest DLC. Not very common and very difficult to see it in flower. And this was a nice animal over here that you see is Trichoeplus, I'm sorry. And you can see it sort of has this, the appendix, all the legs are covered with this growths that actually makes it look like a lichen. So it's very difficult to spot. We only spot it because the lady that owns the lodge knows how to spot it and knows what to look for. Again, nice habitat coming down this waterfall road. In this case, Pam photographing a new species of Bromeliad, or Mesobromeliad, I'm sorry. And we come down to the Amazon basin. So of course, the temperature here is much, much higher. The elevation is very low and is very, very humid. Some of these areas have been cleared for pasture. There's a nice tropical plants, Erythrina amazonica. And in the tropics, in the lowlands and tropical, it's common to find Acmea. So that's why Acmeas do so well in Florida. Lowlands, very humid and very tropical, while Tillandsia prefer a little bit higher elevation. Acmea manzanaresiana, named after Jose Manzanares. And some tropical trees like this Brownea macrophylla, the flowers being born straight out of the trunk, or inflorescence, I should say. This is a one flower with the stamens. So all this is just an inflorescence growing out of the trunk. Very unique. Brisia dubia. And like I said, Acmeas are very common when you get a lower elevation, tropical Amazon, Acmea hopi. And another Guzmania claviformis. Quite a few Pitcarnias, Pitcarnia cosalgensis, a detail of the flower. And a very interesting Pitcarnia brunescens. It's hard to spot. The plant is right here, And this is the inflorescence, and this is what the inflorescence look like. So you can see Pitcairnias can be quite interesting. Pitcairnia bakeri, one of my favorite Pitcairnias. You can see orange flowers born out of sort of like a black or dark brown bracts inflorescence. Pitcairnia bakeri. Pitcairnia septiformis. I have only seen this plant once in bloom. I know exactly where it is, and I stop there every time. But if it's not in flower, it's just sort of like a corn plant. And Tillandsia midifolia, which is widespread. And Pitcairnia hitchcockiana, with detail of the inflorescence. Like I said, in every trip, you will get these beautiful views of the volcano. I forgot which volcano was this, but it's also north of Banyuls. We get again into montane forest and even a little bit into the paramo, because we're going to be going all the way up to 10,000 feet. Acmea longifolia. And this genus, Verauia, I think there's two species growing in Ecuador, Verauia altoni, but there's also Verauia gladiolifolia, gladioliflora, I'm sorry. Nice habitats, going up in elevation, still Guzmania camalifolia. And a very nice Guzmania, usually grown in very humid terrain. You can see it's got lichen just literally just, it was all flooded. Guzmania moreniana coming into bloom. Very nice, this is a Melastomataceae, Merenia pastazana. Merenias usually have purple or pink flowers, and only, I think, one or two species have orange flowers. And again, when it gets tropical with lots of rain, it's not uncommon to see these tree ferns. And Guzmania mosquera growing on the side of the road. And Bill and Helen, I think they were on this trip when this volcano exploded. We were walking around this, botanizing on this nice road near Quito, and we just heard an explosion, and we looked up, and there it was, a volcano just exploded. Tillandsia maculata, a detail of the inflorescence and the plant right here. And Guzmania diffusa with the red rachis and yellow flowers. And growing side by side with this plant, Guzmania hirtzi, which has yellow flowers, but the rachis is all yellow. So in the same area, you'll find these two Guzmanias. And Guzmania biflora, much larger plants than the ones we saw next to the volcano. Silencia Complanata, also widespread. And Tillandsia hirsti. As you can see, the trees are loaded. In this case, I think they're mesobromeliads. When they're not in bloom, they're hard to identify. I think it's Capitulihera. Yes. You can see an old inflorescence right here and just coming into bloom. This was a plant that we recently found. I haven't seen it before, Tillandsia cuculata. And again, we were with Jose Manzanares on that particular day, so he was able to identify all these plants for us. Grassinia gudae, named after Eric Gude from Holland, the Netherlands. Guzmania xanthobractea, very showy Guzmania with very nice inflorescence. And we go all the way up to, I think, 12,000 feet. Again, more puya, and this is a typical paramo area. And in the paramo, where you have these puya, these bromeliads, it's not uncommon to have these spectacle bears again, signs on the side of the road. They show that it's not uncommon to see bears. I never saw bears in this place though. And just a detail of this Puya clava hercules, which is probably one of the nicest one, has a very thick inflorescence with beautiful blue flowers coming out of it, as you can see here. And even though you're at 12,000 feet in elevation, you'll still find some orchids, Odontoglossum on the left, epidendrons on the right. And we drop again to the Monsonic Forest on the other side of Quito. So this is again a humid forest, but very different from the low elevation forest that you find on the Amazon. This gets the rain from the Pacific, not from the Amazon. So basically we go and stay in Mindo, which is a nice town in the middle of this forest. And you can see what the habitat looks like. Yes, it has been changed a little bit by human activity, as you can see over here, but in the mountains, it's pretty much pristine, nice habitat. Mesobromeliad doherty, named recently also by Jose Manzanares, Mesobromeliad superba. And quite a nice Guzmania bracteosa, which has sort of like a yellow flowers being born of this burgundy color bracts. Mesobromeliad capitulifera growing on the side of the road. And this Guzmania alborosia that we also saw in the southern part of Ecuador. Pitcairnia nigra. As you can tell, Pitcairnias need a lot of humidity and a lot of rain throughout the year, no dry season. Pitcairnia fusca. All these plants grow on these side roads around Mindo. So it's very nice to spend the day botanizing and making the little bus stop every few meters to have pictures of these different plants. Pitcairnia soderoi. Beautiful orange flowers. Pitcairnia conmixta, also growing on the side of the road. Pitcairnia lutheri, named after Harry Luther. And Pitcairnia dendroidea. This is one of the largest Tillandsias, Tillandsia lyman-smithi, which is also found in the south. I deleted the pictures, or I hide the pictures from the south, as the pictures here are a lot more showy, and it actually shows how big this plant can be. This is somebody from Australia, owns a nice, probably the largest nursery in Australia. And this is on a plant that was obviously taken from a tree, Tillandsia lyman-smithi, but you can see he's not very tall, but this plant is twice as tall as he is. You can see how large this plant can get. And more Guzmania gloriosa that are actually widespread. And just a couple more before going back to Quito. Tillandsia superba on the left. I'm sorry, Tillandsia superba on the right, Tillandsia pastense on the left. Again, this tree is covered with these Tillandsias. This is going from Mindo to Quito on this nice road. Again, this dirt road that don't get used anymore. And he was really excited when he saw this, because he's been looking for a plant for herbarium sheet to describe Tillandsia spatacea, growing not far from Quito, but still like an hour away, because the road is quite windy road and sort of like a difficult road to go. Tillandsia spatacea here. And like I said before, if you go to Ecuador, you'll see plenty of birds every day, and very easy to photograph, as they're quite friendly and you can get fairly close to them. All types of butterflies and different wildlife, as you can see here. When we have time to make a quick stop to Otavalo Market, again, another one of those tight communities that they held together and have the most famous market in Ecuador. Of course, very touristy, But as you can see, the people still dress with the old fashion, the way they're dressed. Some of this stuff is probably not even made over there, maybe even made in China. But anyway, it's a nice market to spend a few dollars and buy some souvenirs before going back. And just a few nice pictures of birds, hummingbirds, and a nice parrot. And just some people always ask, what are your next tours? With this pandemic, I've been basically postponing the trips from 2020 to 2021. I have been able to do one trip into Baja in April, and that was quite nice to be out in the field again. I do have a trip planned for Madagascar, which might be canceled in this October. So basically, this is what's on the menu. I'm optimistic about Argentina, Chile for November 2021. The trip to Ecuador that was planned for September has been postponed for January. And again, I'm optimistic about that one because Ecuador is doing quite well. And I think by January, things will be under control. People are getting vaccinated. And I also like to go in January because, like I said in the beginning, most of my trips have been done in July. So to go in January will show me different plants that I haven't seen sometimes in bloom before. Brazil, it's scheduled for July 2022. Then South Africa for succulents. And I'm sorry again, Peru to see Puya Raimondi as the main plant on this trip for September 2022. And Madagascar, probably the trip that is postponed this year will be done next year. Sorry about the time. I went a little bit over time. It's 60 minutes. So I thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you enjoy it. And I think you can see how diverse this plant is. And I'm going to be honest, this presentation, I have it with over 400 slides. So I've been, I think I have 440. So I have to hide a lot of the slides. I just cannot show everything. Not only bromeliads, but a lot of orchids and a lot of tropical plants, that it will just make this presentation even longer than I've done. I'd like to thank everybody. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and take over. Thank you.
Well, maybe we can have you back next year to talk about more of your trips. That was spectacular. That was spectacular.
I appreciate it, Barry.
But a quick question. I think it's on everybody's mind. What's the ballpark, the range for the cost of your tours?
It depends. Probably from 3,800 to, I think the most expensive is about 4,800. Madagascar, I think, is expensive because you have to do it on 4-wheel drive. Namibia also, because the hotels are quite expensive and you also do it on 4-wheel drives. And all the trips are all inclusive. So basically you just need to get there and we'll take care of everything. Transportation, park fees, hotel, meals, etc.
How long are they? 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
2 weeks to 3 weeks. Madagascar is almost 3 weeks. Yeah. But usually
spectacular.
15 days, it's 16 days is pretty much average.
Well, there's nobody who would, if I could afford it, there's nobody I would rather go with than you.
I told you that you can afford it. And I told you that I take care of your medicine. I have people traveling with medicine and I can keep it cold. So you're welcome. You're welcome to show. Bill and Helen Lindquist have traveled with me, I think, several times. Nada has traveled with me to Ecuador. I think that's pretty much it from what I see on the people. But most of the people who are in the Bromelia in California have done 1 or 2 trips. And like I said, Ecuador is probably my favorite because you see so many plants. Peru is very interesting. It combines cactus and bromeliads, and so does Brazil. So,
and one other question, and I'll let other people talk. Sorry, has it made a push to keep its national parks in good shape, or is there a lot of extractivism and plant theft?
Ecuador is probably one of the best countries in South America to establish national parks. It has also very strict laws about you cannot even take seeds from Ecuador. It's illegal to take any plant material out of Ecuador. Sometimes I use a local guide, and honestly, I don't mind, especially in plants that have millions of seeds. I don't mind people taking seeds. However, he was very, very vigilant that people do not take any seeds, not even Pitcairnia seeds. That they're literally millions on any capsule. But anyway, Ecuador has been very good in protecting a lot of these areas. There's a lot of international money and funds going into purchasing land for reserves and stuff like that. So it's one of the most organized countries in South America to establish all these, not only just national parks, they're also private reserves and stuff like that. And most of them are very, very open to visit. So that's a good thing.
One last question. What about botanical gardens, state or university? Are there a lot of them or just a few?
No, there is one in Guayaquil, which is more like a cultural thing. It's not really a botanical garden. However, I ask people to come a day early and we usually go and visit it. And there's a few plants, but there's also animals. It's sort of like more like a park, or more, it has a little bit of cultural things. And there is a botanical garden in Quito, which is okay. It's kind of small, and it's not, these places, they usually lack the funds to be in good shape.
Well, maybe we can get involved in helping these people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people involved in preserving the land, which is more important than the habitats.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of funds that are usually just funnel money into purchasing land for conservation.
Yeah, I get it. I'm interested in promoting exactly bromeliads and maybe sponsoring botanical gardens at the universities.
Right.
We'll talk about it. If I do anything, I'll include you.
All right. Yeah, I know the people that work in the botanical gardens, so that will be the person to talk.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyone else have questions?
Not a question. The quality of your pictures, the way you put the presentation together was really superb, and your knowledge of everything was fascinating. And thank you so much. It was really, really enjoyable.
The knowledge comes from the habitat, and just for looking at plants in habitat. It's not that I studied that much, but literally after seeing them in habitat, you learn a lot about the biology of the plant. And the photography gets long because I try to show as much as I can, but I know it's long and it can get boring because there's a lot of plants to show, but you can see the diversity.
I doubt anybody who was watching this was bored for more, even a half a second. Really...
Hey, Guillermo, next time you find an unnamed volcano, maybe you can name it after me.
All right, I'll do that. I think there's a few. If you travel from Chile to Argentina, I think there's a few. I don't think volcanoes are named after people, are they, Bill?
Well, we could always start a new trend.
All right, but they don't have Latin names. I don't know what the name of the volcano.
I think you have to walk up to the rim, the crater rim.
All right.
I think you have to contribute a virgin.
Yeah.
Are any of these plants exported? Is there any business of that type in Ecuador?
Yeah, you have probably heard of Equagenera, which mainly exports orchids, but it does. I think I don't want to get too political, but I think it has imported some plants in the States, mainly orchids. There were some issues with some cycads. Some of you might know the politics of it, and they usually import mainly Guzmanias, Guzmania gloriosas, I think, and they usually bring them to shows. If there is a big show, usually orchid shows either in Santa Barbara or in Miami, they will bring, together with the orchids, will bring some Tillandsias. I've been to their business. I don't want to make any comments. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to export. To get export licenses is very difficult.
Yeah, they do have the licenses. They do have the licenses, and they do export. And there's actually,
I'm just saying, it's why it's so limited. It's much harder to have a nursery and to export out of these countries.
Yeah, it is difficult.
Very difficult. Very
yeah.
difficult.
But there's a much bigger trade with orchids, and that's where the money is nowadays, and that's why they usually 90% of what they export is orchids.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Your talk was excellent, by the way.
I appreciate that.
You.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
We definitely want you back next year for another subject.
Well,
put us on the schedule for, June or July or August next year.
Next year, I will have to work quite a bit to make up for the last 2 years.
Okay.
I was talking to my son today, and I go, "Hey, next year you won't be seeing me very often. If everything is going." I'm optimistic that things will go back to kind of normal next year.
Okay. I get it.
I'm going to be traveling.
I get it. We can always do it recorded.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it live.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to go to California, but again, it's just a couple of weeks that I need to take off to go.
Yep, I get it.
All right.
Again, really, when we sent the notice out, you've actually made live presentation to our society in the past, and glad that I get to see you. I was a member back in the 70s and 80s and took a few decades off, and then I guess you spoke before I got back involved about 5 years ago.
All right, and I will appreciate if you can put the link on YouTube so I can share it with some of the friends, especially the ones that are in Australia.
Oh yeah, we'll let it be known far and wide. Okay. And just to assure you, I will also put on a copyright title board at the end with your name and your website.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
The only reason we do the copyright on YouTube is to protect the speakers.
Right.
But when we have someone like you, I make sure to put a second title board with your own copyright.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. By the way, this talk, it was the one, or mostly the one that I presented in Australia. There was a conference in 2018. I'm sorry, 2020. No, 2019 in the Gold Coast. So most of this presentation came from that particular talk.
Right. Yeah, because I think, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think when you were at the San Fernando Valley Bromeliad Society, this is going back 5 years, we saw your Colombia, I think it was a Colombia presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Which
yes.
was also just spectacular.
Yeah, Colombia is great. I wish to go back over there, but a lot of people are still afraid to go to Colombia. I guess still a little bit of with the FARC and all that. And
the politics is crazy.
But no, I really like Colombia. Colombia has great habitats as well. Great habitats. Anyway, I appreciate your attention. I'm gonna zoom out because it's 11:30 over here.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Night, Guillermo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'm too tired to do anything. Does anybody want to talk about anything else? Ken, do you have any?
I really enjoyed seeing plants in my collection and habitat. That really meant a lot. And I didn't realize some were from such high altitude, and few that he said didn't take much water. I water them a lot more than they get in nature. But I found it really interesting and look forward to seeing it again.
Guillermo understates his background. He's a PhD botanist. And so we're getting the benefit of his overview and his very in-depth understanding of botany and biology. He just happens to do it in a very low-key way.
Yeah.
But I consider him one of the top 5 speakers on bromeliads anywhere in the world.